Shalom. Today we're going to talk about the holy works of God. It is important to note that it was always God's intention that the people of Israel would serve him. This is one of the reasons that God wanted Israel to be set free from Pharaoh in the first place, so that they could go and worship him. Part of worshiping God was holy service that would be done at the tent of meeting. This was a tremendously important piece of work to be done by a tremendously specific group of people. It couldn't just be anyone doing this work. There was some heavy consecration that needed to take place because the work was going to be done through the priests, and the work they were doing was holy. In today's world, we seem to lack an understanding of things that are holy to God. It is my prayer that holiness, which includes sacred work done for the kingdom of God, would be recovered now and forever. Since this work that had to be done at the tent of meeting was tremendously important to God, he made sure to tell Moses, to remove anyone who was unclean away from the tent of meeting. If there was any defilement the person had, then they were not allowed to live near the tent, because the tent had to remain holy to the Lord. Now, some might look down on this and call this a cruel order from God. However, open up your mind deeply and see that God was protecting those people from receiving his judgment. Because God is holy, and his holiness judges sin or anything unclean by default, he couldn't allow his tabernacle to be defiled. The people's physical infirmities or uncleanness was a reflection of the defilement of their souls. Therefore, anything that was defiled within could taint the spiritual atmosphere or could disrupt what God wanted to do. And the core of it all was that God wanted a sacred space where he could move freely and flow without any disruption. And unfortunately, people tend to get in the way of God moving freely. It has nothing to do with God not being all powerful or all knowing or whatever you might think, but it has everything to do with the Lord being patient with us because he wants us to participate in the work. But if we are not willing vessels, and if we are not suitable for the work that he wants to do in a pure manner, then that disrupts things. He's not going to force himself. However, he will establish very specific boundaries. That way, there is no disruption. The priests who served God were to monitor people who did wrong to those around them. And they were to examine unfaithful spouses. There was a civil justice system that was established, a moral code for living, if you will, that neighbors were to treat one another with respect and to love each other. And if a husband was suspicious of his wife being unfaithful, there had to be an examination and ritual done by the priest to determine whether this was so or not. And needless to say, if the spouses were indeed unfaithful, then they were subject to a curse for their unfaithfulness against their spouse. This should show us that the Lord finds that holiness is of the utmost importance for his people. He understands the danger of what happens when marriage ends in unfaithfulness. Then in this Torah portion, there is a special vow that anyone was able to take if they wished. They didn't need to be from the line of Aaron to take this vow. It was the vow of the Nazarite, a special time of consecration and holiness to the Lord. The Nazarite would have to abstain from a few things, such as refraining from wine, staying away from the deceased, and so on. And what's interesting about the Nazarite vow is that it required that the man taking the vow would allow his beard and his hair to grow and to not cut it at all. This was a special time of separation for that person and God. There was something supernatural taking place, and the hair growing and the abstaining from certain worldly pleasures that may not necessarily be sinful in and of itself, but still worldly pleasures, abstaining from them was showing the process that God was taking the Nazarite through. There was something happening that God wanted this person to remain holy unto himself. Next, we are reminded of the Aaronic blessing, which was to be spoken over the Israelites using the name of the Lord. It was a holy blessing to be uttered for generations to come. You see, God was establishing something sacred in the hearts of his people through these practices that would be remembered for generations, and it is remembered to this day. He was establishing the priesthood of the nation. Even more than that, he was establishing the heart of the nation. God was establishing the respect and love of your neighbor, honor in the family, priestly duties, and a special vow that all could partake in for the glory of Adonai. These things combined all have an element of the holy services of God for the people of Israel and all the nations who desire to come to him.